The hall was quiet when the truth finally cracked open. Detective Adora spread a white wedding binder on the table. Inside were neat pages with flowers printed on the edges, seating plans, vendor bills, and a map of the ballroom. But there were also things that did not belong. A small receipt for peanut oil, a set of emergency cards with a wrong address written in blue ink, and a slim plastic EpiPen sleeve. Empty. Saad, the bride's best friend and maid of honor, stared at the binder. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were not. "You kept every detail," Adora said softly. "You planned every moment." Sada's mouth trembled for a second. Then she lifted her chin. "I planned the wedding," she whispered, "and I planned the rest." The door behind them opened. Kelechi, the new husband, now a widower, stepped in, holding his gold ring in his fist like it might bite him. His face was gray. He looked from Saad to the binder to the detectives, and his lips parted as if to speak. The room filled with a heavy silence, like the air before rain. "Tell us," Adora said. "Tell us exactly what you did." Sada's eyes flicked to Kelechi. A small, strange smile crept across her face. He was never supposed to find out. Detective Adeora's partner reached for the cuffs, and then Saad did something no one expected. She reached into her purse, and on the morning of her wedding, Amara woke up before the sun. It felt like a bright secret in her chest. Today was the day. She lay very still for a moment, listening to the quiet street outside her window and the low hum of the fridge in the kitchen. Her mother was already up, boiling water. The smell of ginger tea slid under Amara's door, warm and sweet. It was a soft, safe smell, the kind that makes a person think the world will always be kind too. Amara sent one text to her best friend. "Saad awake." 3 dots danced, then stopped. "Finally, I've been awake all night. Today has to be perfect." Saad had planned every part of the wedding. The flowers that looked like little white stars, the candles, the music playlist that went from soft jazz to Afrobeats at exactly 7 p.m. She had a purple notebook where she wrote every plan. People said she was amazing. Amara said it too. When things got too much at work, when vendors were late, when money was tight, Saad fixed it. "You just be happy," Saad would say. "Leave the rest to me." Amara believed her. Why wouldn't she? Saad had been there since primary school. They had shared snacks, secrets, and silly dreams. When Amara cried after she failed a test once, Saad held her and said, "I will always show up for you." So this morning, when Saad arrived with a bag full of makeup hairpins and a tiny emergency kit, Amara smiled. "You thought of everything." "Everything," Saad said, and the word felt like a warm blanket. They laughed as the makeup artist dotted Amara's cheeks with light. Her mother whispered a prayer. The room felt calm. The dress waited on a hanger, simple and lovely, white like a cloud. On the table, next to the jewelry and perfume, lay Amara's clutch bag with the most important thing of all, her EpiPen. Amara had a severe peanut allergy. Everyone knew. She kept the EpiPen with her the way people keep their phones. Saad touched the bag lightly. "We'll keep this close," she said. "Thank you," Amara said. She felt safe. The hours moved like soft waves. The photographer clicked. The bridesmaids laughed. At the church, the music rose, and Amara walked down the aisle on her father's arm. Kelechi stood at the front in a neat dark suit, his eyes shining. He looked like a boy trying not to grin too hard. When he saw Amara, the grin came anyway. It was a good moment, a quiet, low moment, not flashy, but full. They said their vows. They promised to be kind, to listen, to forgive. When the crowd cheered, Amara saw Saad wipe her eyes and clap the loudest. The day felt like a story built of simple, good bricks. But stories can twist when you are not looking. At the reception, the hall glowed with fairy lights. The DJ played soft songs first, like a warm-up before the fast beats. People ate jollof rice and grilled fish. Children chased bubbles near the photo booth. The wedding cake sat on a silver table, wrapped in smooth white icing. Tiny sugar flowers scattered like snow. It was beautiful. It looked innocent. Saad was everywhere at once. She fixed the tilted centerpiece. She whispered to the DJ. She walked behind the cake table, checking the tablecloth, the knife, the napkins, the little heart-shaped plates. When the baker asked where to place the extra cupcakes, Saad pointed to the side table. Andes crowded around Amara, teasing her in kind voices. Today you are queen. Tomorrow you will cook breakfast for your king. Over it all, Saada's voice floated. Picture time, cake time. Amara reached for her clutch, patting out a habit. It felt a little lighter. She opened it and frowned. Lip gloss. Tissue. Small mirror. No EpiPen. Did you move my pen? She asked Saad. Saad blinked like a friend who had to think hard. Maybe it fell out in the car. But you won't need it, she said, laughing softly. We warned all the vendors. No peanuts anywhere. Amara nodded, a little uneasy. Then she told herself not to be silly. Saad had everything under control, and the night was going so well. The cake-cutting song began. Guests gathered. Kelechi stood behind Amara, his hands around hers, and together they lifted the knife for the first slice. There was cheering and camera flashes. The cake was sweet and soft. A small piece went to Amara, a small piece to Kelechi. People clapped and sang. Saad held up a cupcake, like a tiny crown. Taste this one, too. It's the special batch, she said, smiling big. Made just for you. Amara took a small bite. At first, there was nothing. Then a quiet itch at the back of her throat. She coughed just once. Maybe it was the air, she thought. Maybe the room was too warm. She took a sip of water. The itch grew sharp. She coughed again. The edges of the room softened, like heat on a road. Saad touched her arm. You're okay. It's just nerves. Weddings can do that. Amara nodded and tried to smile. She felt a tiny swell beneath her skin, near her lips. A buzzing rush ran along her arms. Her chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a rope around it and pulled. Water, she said. The word came out small. Kelechi frowned. Amara, are you all right? She reached for her clutch again. Still no pen. Her breath came shorter. She put a hand on the table to steady herself. The rope around her chest pulled tighter. Is there any peanut in the cake? Kelechi asked the baker, a hint of fear leaking into his voice. The baker shook his head, confused. We followed the instructions. We changed the oil. We cleaned the tools. No peanuts. Saad stepped between them, calm like a news reader. Everyone, please relax. It's probably just the heat, she said. Let her sit down. Amara sat. The itch turned to fire. Her throat felt thick. She tried to speak, but her voice was a thin rasp. The room tilted. She heard the DJ lower the music. She heard an Andy say, Is she fainting? She heard her mother's feet running. Where is the EpiPen? Her mother cried. In her bag, Saad answered quickly. Check again. They checked. It was not there. Ador was not there yet. No detective was. At that moment, it was only family, friends, and one comrade of honor who kept saying, It's fine, it's fine. Kelechi grabbed his phone. Call the ambulance, he said to Saad, his voice shaking. I'm on it, Saad said, and walked away with the phone to her ear. Amara's lips were swelling now. Her skin had tiny bumps. The rope around her chest pulled hard. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears, loud like drumsticks. Her mother held her hand and whispered, Stay with me. The crowd became a wall of faces. People tried to help. One person fanned her. Another brought ice. Another sobbed. Where's the ambulance? Kelechi shouted. Saad came back. Calm, calm, always calm. They said they're close. The driver just asked for the address again. Don't worry. Another minute. Another minute. Amara's vision starred at the edges. Her mother cried, Please, someone, carry her to the car. No, someone else said. The ambulance is almost here. They can help in the truck. We need oxygen. We need the right medicine. Amara thought, Not yet. I can't stop yet. She tried to stand. Her knees did not agree. She slid to the floor like a doll with loose strings. Somewhere far, a siren cried. It sounded like a child who had lost her way. Saad looked toward the door, then at her watch. They said they turned on King Street, she announced. Kelechi stared at her. King Street? That's 2 neighborhoods away. Why would you send them there? Sada's eyes flickered. Just a blink. That's what I told them, she said quickly. Maybe they misheard. Amara tried to pull air into her chest. It felt like trying to drink through a straw that someone had squeezed shut. She reached out for anyone, and her hand found Sada's dress. Sad knelt and stroked her hair. Sure, I'm here, she whispered. I will always show up for you. Another siren. Closer, but not close enough. The hall seemed to spin slowly, as if the lights were stars going around and around. Amara's mother pressed her cheek to her daughter's forehead. Stay, she begged. Please stay. Kelechi ran to the door and into the night. Here, over here, he shouted into the dark. He waved his arms. Cars honked. People flooded outside. Inside, the DJ turned off the music. The fairy lights buzzed. Sada's face bent close to Amara's. Her smile was small and neat, like a line drawn with a ruler. It will be over soon, she said, and for a second her voice didn't sound like comfort. It sounded like a secret ending. Amara's eyes widened. She tried to say Sada's name. Her tongue felt thick. She reached for her throat. The hall doors banged. Make way, someone yelled. A security guard ran in with a first aid box. He rustled through it. Bandages, alcohol wipes, nothing that could push the rope off Amara's chest. The siren kept crying somewhere not here. Kelechi rushed back in, phoned his ear, shouting into it. No, not King Street. King Avenue. Why would you go to King Street? She's dying. The room froze for a heartbeat. Saad stood very still, only her fingers smoothing her dress. Amara looked at the faces swimming above her. Her mother, Kelechi, strangers whose mouths were open with fear. The world slipped like a plate falling. Her chest pulled once, twice, then the lights blurred into one long white line as Amara's head tilted back, and the sound in the room dropped away like a stone into deep water. The siren wailed nearer now, a desperate cry pushing through the thick night air. People stepped back to clear a path. Kelechi knelt by Amara, tapping her cheek. Stay with me, please, he whispered, voice breaking. Her mother was still clutching her daughter's hand, rocking slightly, murmuring prayers that came out more like sobs. The ambulance doors burst open, and 2 paramedics rushed in. One knelt immediately, checking Amara's pulse, while the other ripped open a fresh EpiPen and pressed it into her thigh. The click of the needle was sharp, final. Her body jerked slightly. They lifted her onto a stretcher, oxygen mask pressed over her face. Kelechi tried to climb in, but the paramedics told him to wait until they secured her. He followed close anyway, his hand shaking so hard the wedding band almost slipped off his finger. Saad stood at the edge of the crowd, her face pale. She hugged herself, whispering to someone about how frightening it all was. When Kelechi's eyes caught hers, she tilted her head and mouthed, "She'll be okay." He wanted to believe her. He really did. The hospital waiting room smelled faintly of antiseptic and old coffee. The bright lights made Kelechi's headache worse. He paced. He sat. He stood again. Saad brought him a cup of tea, but it went cold in his hands. An hour later, a doctor came out, his expression unreadable. "We did everything we could," he began, and Kelechi felt the floor sway beneath him. The words after that were like muffled noise. Reaction too strong, arrived too late. No epinephrine on hand at the start. Kelechi sank into the chair. His chest felt hollow, like something had been scooped out. He heard his mother-in-law's scream echo down the corridor. People turned to look. No one spoke. Saad stepped forward, tears streaking her makeup. She wrapped her arms around Kelechi. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "She was my best friend." Kelechi didn't hug her back. He stared at the doctor's shoes and thought of Amara's last breath. Detective Adora Okafor was called in 2 days later. At first, it seemed like a tragic accident, a deadly allergic reaction despite all precautions. But when she looked over the initial incident report, something caught her attention. The ambulance dispatch log. "They were sent to the wrong address?" she asked the attending officer. "Yes, ma'am. King Street instead of King Avenue." "And who gave them that?" Adora asked. The officer hesitated. "Guess at the wedding." The maid of honor, I think. Adora leaned back in her chair. She had seen enough accidents turn into homicides to know when something smelled wrong. This one reeked. At Amara's funeral, the sun was merciless. People fanned themselves with folded programs. Kelechi sat in the front row, his head bowed. The white coffin looked too small for all the love that had lived inside Amara. Adora stood at the back, sunglasses hiding her watchful eyes. She saw Saad moving between rows, embracing guests, dabbing her eyes with delicate lace handkerchief. She noticed how Saad lingered close to Kelechi, offering to fetch him water, brushing imaginary dust from his suit. It wasn't the closeness that bothered Adora, it was the timing. Barely a week had passed. After the burial, Adora approached Kelechi quietly. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said. "I need to ask you about that night." Kelechi frowned but nodded. "Anything. Did Amara usually keep her allergy pen with her?" "Yes," he said quickly. "Always. She even carried two sometimes." "And on the wedding night?" Kelechi's face twisted. "It wasn't there. We couldn't find it." Adeora's eyes narrowed behind her glasses. "And the ambulance delay, did you notice anything strange?" He looked away. Saad called them. She said she told them King Avenue. Maybe they heard it wrong. "Maybe," Adora said, but her mind whispered otherwise. Back at her office, Adora spread the evidence so far. Victim: severe peanut allergy. EpiPen missing at time of reaction. Dessert served by maid of honor. Ambulance misdirected. Coincidences stacked too neatly often collapsed into something uglier when pushed. She decided her next step would be simple. Find out exactly what went into that special batch of cupcakes and who prepared them. 2 days later, Adora visited the bakery. The baker, a young man with flowers still clinging to his sleeves, remembered the night clearly. "We don't use peanuts in any wedding orders," he explained. "The bride's friend, Saad, I think, was very clear about that. But she did come in the morning before the wedding with her own bottle of oil. Said it was special and wanted us to fry some decorations in it for the cupcakes." "What kind of oil?" Adora asked. "Peanut oil," he said without hesitation. She said the bride loved the flavor in small amounts. Adeora's pen stilled on her notepad. "And you believed her?" "She's the maid of honor," the baker said helplessly. "I didn't think she'd hurt her own best friend." Adora thanked him, her pulse steady but her mind racing. She now had motive-shaped shadows in her head, but no light yet to show the picture clearly. That night, Kelechi sat alone in his apartment, scrolling through photos from the wedding. He stopped on one where Saad was cutting cake beside Amara, her hand resting lightly on the bride's arm, her smile just a bit too wide. He didn't know why it bothered him so much, but it did. His phone buzzed. A text from Saad. "You don't have to be alone tonight. I can come over if you need company." Kelechi stared at the screen. Something cold slid into his chest. For the first time since the funeral, he felt not just grief, but suspicion. The next morning, Detective Adora received a call from the bakery delivery driver. He had remembered something. After delivering the cupcakes, Saad had slipped him an envelope with cash and told him not to mention she had been there that morning. Adeora's grip tightened on her phone. The shadows in her mind sharpened into outlines. The question was no longer if Saad was involved. It was why, and how far she was willing to go to get what she wanted. That evening, Kelechi opened his door to find Saad smiling on his doorstep, holding a basket of food. "Thought you might need a friend," she said softly. Kelechi hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. He didn't see the unmarked car parked a block away, with Detective Adora watching through the windshield, pen poised, waiting for the moment the mask slipped. And it was about to. Detective Adora sat in the unmarked car, sipping lukewarm coffee, eyes fixed on the apartment door. She could see movement to the thin curtains, shadows crossing, a hand lifting something, a slow lean forward. Every few minutes, Saada's silhouette drew closer to Kelechi's, her gestures soft and practiced. Inside, Kelechi had placed a basket she brought on the table. The smell of egusi soup and fresh bread filled the room. Saad set out bowls like she belonged there. "You've lost weight," she said, almost as if it were a compliment. "You're not eating." Kalechi gave a humorless laugh. Hard to eat when you're not sleeping either. She placed a hand on his arm. I know. I feel it too. We both lost her. Kalechi stared at her hand. It felt strange. Her touch was warm, but it wasn't comforting. You were her best friend, he said slowly. You must have loved her. Sada's eyes shimmered. I did, more than anyone could imagine. He thought her voice shook at the end, but he wasn't sure if it was grief or something else. Across the street, Adeora's phone buzzed. It was a lab report from the bakery samples she collected. Her eyes skimmed down the page until she found it. Traces of peanut protein in the frosting decorations of the special batch cupcakes. Adora exhaled slowly. That wasn't just negligence. It was deliberate. There was no reason peanut oil should have been anywhere near those cakes, unless someone wanted it there. But she still needed the thread that tied it all together. Motive. Later that night, Kalechi walked Saad to the door. She lingered in the doorway, looking up at him. You don't have to go through this alone, she said softly. I'm here for you. Always. Kalechi gave her a faint smile. I appreciate that, but I need space. Her smile faltered just a fraction before she nodded and walked away, her perfume trailing behind her. Kalechi closed the door, leaned against it, and let out a long breath. That faint coldness from before was still there. The next morning, Adora requested Amara's phone records from the week before the wedding. Something Saad hadn't counted on. Best friends text constantly, and sometimes they tell each other things they don't tell anyone else. Scrolling through the messages, Adora found one from Amara to another friend just days before the wedding. Sada's been weird lately. Keeps making comments about Kalechi. Says we're the perfect couple, but sometimes I feel like she means her and him. 2 days later, she joked about me not showing up to the wedding. I laughed, but it didn't feel like a joke. Adeora's jaw tightened. The motive thread was starting to weave itself. Envy, obsession, maybe even possession. Meanwhile, Kalechi received a call from Adora. I think your wife's death was not an accident, she said plainly. Kalechi froze. What are you saying? I'm saying your best man was never the one you should have been watching, Adora replied. It was the maid of honor. He was silent for a long time. If that's true, what do we do? You let me handle the investigation, and you act normal around her. Can you do that? Kalechi swallowed. If it means getting justice for Amara, yes. 2 days later, Adora visited Saad under the guise of routine questioning. We just need to clarify a few things, she said, sitting across from her at a cafe. The ambulance delay, for example. Saad stirred her coffee. It was a mistake. I gave the right address. They must have misheard. And the cupcakes. Adora asked casually. You were very specific about them. Saad smiled tightly. Of course. I wanted them perfect for Amara. Adora leaned forward. Perfect enough to bring your own ingredients? For the first time, Sada's eyes flickered with something darker. Annoyance? Fear? But it was gone almost instantly. I'm a perfectionist. You can ask anyone. I will, Adora said. Standing up, I'll be in touch. That evening, Kalechi received another text from Saad. Thinking about you tonight. He didn't reply. Instead, he forwarded it straight to Adora. She texted back. Keep everything she sends. She's telling us more than she thinks. A week passed, and Adora got her break. One of the wedding videographers contacted her, saying he had extra footage that hadn't been included in the final cut. When Adora watched it, her pulse quickened. In the clip, Saad stood at the dessert table alone, pouring oil into a small saucepan, humming to herself. She glanced over her shoulder once, then smiled faintly before continuing. Adora knew then this wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was intent caught on camera. But she also knew Saad wasn't going to go quietly. People like her rarely did. That night, as Kalechi locked up his apartment, he noticed something strange. His front door latch didn't catch properly, like someone had tried it from the outside. When he stepped into the hall, he thought he saw Sada's shadow disappear around the corner. And suddenly, he realized the danger might not be over yet. Kalechi didn't sleep that night. Every creak in the walls sounded like footsteps. Every shadow seemed too still, as if holding its breath. He checked the locks twice, then 3 times. But the image of Sada's shadow at the corner of the hallway stayed with him. At 2 a.m., his phone buzzed. A message from her. "I couldn't sleep. Was thinking about you. You don't have to be alone in that apartment tonight." He didn't reply. Instead, he took a screenshot and sent it to Detective Adora. She called him back immediately. "Don't engage," she warned. "She's testing boundaries. That means she's getting restless and reckless." The next morning, Adora met with her partner, Inspector Danjuma, to review the evidence. Motive: possible obsession with Kelechi, jealousy of Amara. Means: brought peanut oil to bakery, instructed baker to use it. Opportunity: served special batch cupcakes directly to Amara. Cover: called ambulance to wrong address. Delayed response. And now, with the extra footage from the videographer, they had visual proof of her tampering with food. All that was missing was a direct link tying her intent to harm, not just negligence. Danjuma tapped the table. "We need her to admit it, or slip up on record." Adora nodded. "And I think I know how to make that happen." That afternoon, Kelechi received a call from Saad. She sounded cheerful, almost giddy. "I was thinking," she said, "we should have dinner, just the 2 of us, to remember her and to move forward." Kelechi forced his voice to stay neutral. "All right, tomorrow night." She didn't hide her excitement. "Perfect. My treat." As soon as he hung up, he called Adora. "Good," she said. "We'll wire you. Keep her talking. She'll either try to charm you or slip." The next evening, they met at a quiet restaurant. Saad wore a sleek red dress, and her hair loose around her shoulders. She smiled when she saw Kelechi, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "You look better," she said. "Not so broken." Kelechi didn't answer. He let her talk, steering the conversation gently toward Amara. "She was lucky," Saad said at one point, swirling her wine. "Not many people get a wedding that beautiful. I made sure of that." "You did," he said, watching her closely. "You thought of everything." Her lips curved. Everything, down to the last detail. Adora's voice murmured in his ear through the tiny earpiece. "Push her. Just a little." Kelechi leaned forward. "But why the peanut oil, Saad?" Her wine glass paused halfway to her mouth. "What?" "You brought it to the bakery," he said, keeping his voice soft. "They told the police." For a fraction of a second, her face froze. Then she laughed. "Oh, that... I thought it would give the cupcakes a special taste. I didn't know." "You knew," Kelechi interrupted, his tone sharper now. "You knew better than anyone." Something flickered in her eyes then, something that looked an awful lot like pride. In the surveillance van outside, Adora's pulse quickened. "Come on," she whispered. Saad leaned closer to Kelechi, her voice low. "She didn't deserve you," she said. "She didn't see you the way I do. And now you're free." Kelechi stared at her. "Free? You think killing her made me yours?" She didn't flinch. "It was supposed to be quick. Painless. I didn't want her to suffer." Adora yanked the van door open and strode inside the restaurant with Danjuma at her heels. Sada's eyes widened when she saw the badge. "You're under arrest," Adora said firmly, "for the murder of Amara Okeke." But as they pulled the cuffs around her wrists, Saad leaned in close to Kelechi and whispered, almost tenderly, "This isn't over. You'll see me again." That night, in his empty apartment, Kelechi locked the door and leaned against it, the same way he had days ago. Only this time, the danger wasn't outside. It was sitting in a holding cell somewhere. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that she meant every word. And Adora knew the case might have just taken a darker turn. The interrogation room was cold, with a single buzzing light overhead. Saad sat across from Detective Adora, her wrists free now but her posture rigid. She didn't look like someone who'd been arrested for murder. She looked like someone waiting for an appointment she knew she would walk out of. Adora dropped a file on the table. It fanned open to reveal photos. The bakery kitchen, the bottle of peanut oil, the EpiPen-less clutch, the ambulance dispatch log. "You planned the wedding," Adora said evenly. You planned the reception, and you planned her death. Saad tilted her head, eyes cool. You think you know everything, detective, but you're wrong. Adora leaned forward. Then explain why you brought peanut oil to a bakery when you knew the bride could die from it. Sada's lips twitched. Because I wanted her to remember that I was the one making her day perfect. I didn't plan for her to, she stopped herself, but the pause hung heavy. She just wasn't as strong as I thought. Adora's partner, Inspector Danjuma, slid a recording device closer. You're admitting you brought it on purpose. I'm admitting nothing that will hold up in court, Saad replied with a smirk. Meanwhile, in the hallway outside, Kelechi sat on a bench, his hands clasped so tight his knuckles turned white. He could hear faint voices from inside the room, but not the words. Every second she was in there, he half expected her to walk out smiling. When Adora finally emerged, her face was unreadable. She's clever, she told him quietly. Too clever to confess outright. But she slipped just enough for us to work with. Kelechi frowned. So she could still get away with it? Adora didn't answer directly. Not if I find what I'm looking for. The next few days were a tangle of leads. Adora combed through financial records, phone logs, and old messages. That's when she found something. A small series of bank transfers from Saad to the ambulance dispatcher who'd taken the original call. She brought the dispatcher in. At first, he denied everything. Then, faced with the transaction records, he crumbled. She told me to stall. He admitted, sweating. Said it was for a prank, to make the groom panic and appreciate her more. I didn't think anyone would die. Adora recorded every word. This was the missing piece, the deliberate delay that made the difference between life and death. But while Adora was building her case, Saad was playing another game. In her holding cell, she wrote letters. The prison guard later told Adora she sent one out every 2 days. Most were to friends and family. One, however, was addressed to Kelechi. When he opened it, his stomach turned. You think you're free of me, but you're wrong. You belong with me. You always have. And when they realize they can't keep me here, I'll come for you. He handed the letter to Adora without a word. The trial date was set. The prosecution was confident. They had motive, means, and the ambulance dispatcher's testimony. But Adora knew juries could be unpredictable, especially when the accused had turned on the charm the way Saad could. In the days leading up to court, Sada's name began to leak into the media. Reporters started calling her the Black Widow bridesmaid. Public opinion was split. Some saw her as a cold-blooded killer, others as a victim of a tragic misunderstanding. And that's when things got worse. On the third day before trial, Adora arrived at the station to find chaos. Someone had posted bail for Saad. The paperwork was clean, the bond fully paid in cash. The person who posted it remained anonymous. By the time Adora got the news, Saad was already gone. That night, Kelechi heard a knock at his door. Not loud, just 3 slow taps. When he looked through the peephole, his heart stopped. It was her, smiling, holding a small white box tied with a ribbon. Kelechi froze at the peephole. The smile on Sada's face wasn't warm. It was the kind that made the air feel colder. She tilted the box slightly, as if showing it off. Through the ribbon, he could make out the corner of a cupcake paper. His mind snapped back to the wedding night, to Amara's lips swelling, to her gasping for breath. A quiet knock came again. Kelechi, her voice sang softly through the door, "We need to talk." He stepped back silently, reaching for his phone. His fingers trembled as he dialed Detective Adora. "She's here," he whispered. Adora's voice sharpened instantly. "Don't open the door. We're on our way." Outside, Sada's smile thinned. She glanced at her watch, then leaned her forehead gently against the door. "I'm not angry, Kelechi," she murmured. "I just want us to be what we were meant to be. She's gone. It's just you and me now." Inside, Kelechi's pulse thundered in his ears. He looked toward the kitchen, scanning for anything he could use as she forced her way in. The knocking grew louder. "You can't hide forever," Saad said, her tone sweet, but edged. "I told you, I always show up for you." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Sada's head lifted, her eyes narrowing. She stepped back from the door, clutching the white box tighter. For one tense moment, Kelechi thought she might try to break in. But then she turned, walking down the hall like she'd only come to deliver a gift. By the time Adora and Inspector Danjuma reached the building, Saad was gone. The only thing left was the faint smell of vanilla frosting lingering in the air. "This changes everything," Adora muttered as they swept the hallway. "Bail or no bail, she's escalating. And she's bold enough to show up at his home. She's not just bold," Kelechi said quietly. "She's certain she can get away with it." Adora looked at him. "We'll make sure she doesn't." The next 48 hours turned into a city-wide search. They checked her known hangouts, old addresses, even the cafe where she met Adora. She was always one step ahead, until a call came from a small motel outside the city. The owner said a woman matching Sada's description had checked in under a false name. Adora didn't hesitate. "We moved tonight." The motel room door creaked open under Danjuma's shoulder. Inside, Saad sat at a small table, calmly packing a suitcase. She didn't look surprised to see them. "I was going to leave you a note," she said, as if they'd interrupted her mid-farewell. Adora stepped inside. "You were going to run. Again." Saad smiled faintly. "Sometimes you have to know when the party's over." "Funny," Adora said. "That's exactly what your victim didn't get to do." They cuffed her without a fight. As she was led past Kelechi, who'd been waiting by the squad car, she paused just long enough to meet his eyes. "This isn't goodbye," she whispered. And for the first time, Kelechi believed her. Back at the station, Adora knew this arrest had to stick. She spent hours with the prosecutor, lining up the bakery footage, the dispatcher's testimony, the financial records, and now, proof that she'd violated bail and made contact with the victim's husband. But that night, alone in her office, Adora couldn't shake a nagging thought. If Saad had been this confident, this calm, even at the moment of arrest, what had she still planned? And worse, who else might be helping her? The trial began on a humid Monday morning. The courtroom was packed. Press, curious onlookers, Amar's family, and a few of Sada's friends who still swore she was innocent. Kelechi sat in the front row beside Detective Adora, his eyes fixed on the woman at the defense table. Saad looked immaculate in a cream suit, her hair pulled back neatly. She smiled faintly as if this were a business meeting, not a murder trial. When the prosecutor outlined the case, peanut oil at the bakery, the missing EpiPen, the ambulance delay, Sada's expression didn't change. She sat with her hands folded, glancing occasionally toward Kelechi like they shared some private joke. The first witnesses spoke. The baker, the ambulance dispatcher, Amar's mother. The jury listened intently. Each detail made the pattern clearer. But on the second day, the defense fired back. Their lawyer painted Saad as a devoted friend, even suggesting the peanut oil could have been an accident by the bakery staff. He hinted that the dispatcher had acted alone to cover his own incompetence. Kelechi clenched his fists under the table. Adora leaned toward him and whispered, "Stay calm. Trials are like chess. You win in the end game." Midway through the week, the prosecution played the wedding video clip, the one where Saad stood at the dessert table, pouring oil into the saucepan. The courtroom went silent. The defense tried to argue she'd been helping the bakers with presentation. But when the baker himself testified that Saad brought the oil from home, the jurors' faces hardened. Still, Saad didn't flinch. On Friday afternoon, Adora took the stand to summarize the investigation. The prosecutor asked her to explain the bail violation, the motel arrest, and the threatening letter to Kelechi. When Adora read the letter aloud, "You think you're free of me, but you're wrong. I'll come for you," the jury shifted uncomfortably. The prosecutor ended with a single question. "Detective, in your professional opinion, was this an accident?" Adora's voice was firm. "No. It was a calculated act to remove Amara from her husband's life." The defense tried a final gambit, putting Saad on the stand. It was risky, but she agreed. She spoke sweetly, describing her years of friendship with Amara, how she helped with every detail of the wedding, and how she never imagined the day would end in tragedy. Then the prosecutor approached for cross-examination. "You said you never imagined this could happen," he began. So why, on the night of the wedding, did you call the ambulance to the wrong address? Saad smiled faintly. Mistakes happen in panic. Is that also why you told the baker to use peanut oil? I never, she began, but he cut her off, sliding a photo across the table. Her pouring oil in the video. For the first time, her composure cracked. You don't understand, she snapped. She didn't deserve him. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge slammed the gavel for order. The prosecutor's voice was calm but lethal. No further questions. As Saad was led back to her seat, she glanced at Kelechi. Her lips moved soundlessly, but he could read it. We'll be together. When closing arguments ended, the jury was dismissed to deliberate. Hours turned into a full day. By the second morning, tension gripped the room. Finally, the jurors filed back in, faces set. The foreman stood. We find a defendant. Kelechi's heartbeat drowned out the rest for a moment, until he forced himself to listen. But before the verdict could be read, a loud crash echoed from the hallway outside the courtroom. Shouting followed, and the bailiffs rushed toward the doors. Adora was on her feet instantly, hand near her holster. Kelechi turned just in time to see one of the guards burst in, eyes wide. She's gone, he said. Sada's gone. For a second, no one moved. The words hung in the air like smoke. Sada's gone. Then the room erupted. Jurors whispering, reporters scrambling for their phones, Amara's mother crying out in panic. Kelechi stood frozen, his stomach hollowing out. How? Adora barked at the guard. She asked to use the restroom before the verdict. The guard stammered. We lost her between the hall and the holding area. One of the side doors was unlocked. Adeora's jaw tightened. She didn't need to guess. Someone had helped her. And whoever it was, they'd planned it for weeks. The courthouse went into lockdown. Officers flooded the exits, but by the time they checked the security cameras, Saad was already on the street, sliding into the back of a dark sedan. The plates came back to a fake registration. Adora watched the footage twice, committing every frame to memory. She's not running to disappear, she told Kelechi quietly. She's running to finish something. Kelechi knew exactly what that meant. That night, Adora insisted he stay in a secure, safe house. But Kelechi refused to hide behind police walls forever. I've lived in fear since the wedding, he told her. If she wants to find me, she will, and I won't be ready if I'm always running. Reluctantly, Adora compromised. 2 undercover officers in his building, cameras at the entrance, and a direct line to her phone. It didn't take long. 3 nights later, the motion sensors at the front of Kelechi's building tripped at 2:14 a.m. The feed showed a slim figure in a dark hoodie, carrying something small in one hand. Adora was already on her way when the figure reached Kelechi's door and bent down. Inside, Kelechi's phone buzzed, Adeora's number. Don't open it, she ordered. She's right outside. The lock clicked softly. Kelechi stepped back, heart pounding, as the door inched open. The hooded figure slipped inside, closing behind her. Saad pushed the hood back, smiling faintly. I told you this wasn't over. He didn't answer. His eyes flicked toward the hallway, and for a split second, so did hers. That's when Adora and her team surged in, weapons drawn. Saad froze, the object in her hand falling to the floor, a cupcake box, identical to the one she brought on bail night. Game's over, Adora said. This time, the cuffs went on tight. 2 months later, the retrial was swift. With the new attempted intrusion on record, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Life in prison without parole. Saad didn't cry. She didn't beg. As she was led away, she glanced back at Kelechi and whispered one last time, I'll always show up for you. After the sentencing, Kelechi stood outside the courthouse with Adora. The sky was heavy with late afternoon clouds. She's gone for good, Adora said. Kelechi nodded slowly. I know, but I'll never forget the look in her eyes. She believed she was the only one who belonged beside me. Adora glanced at him. That's the thing about obsession. It's not love, it's control. And when you take that away, they'll do anything to get it back. He sighed. finally feeling the weight begin to lift. At least now, she can't hurt anyone else. Back at home, Kelechi sat at his kitchen table, staring at a framed photo of Amara on their wedding day. She was laughing in the picture, her head tilted toward him, her eyes full of light. He promised her silently, "I'll live for both of us." And somewhere far away, behind concrete walls and steel bars, Saad sat alone in her cell, staring at the blank wall and smiling.